Hey guys, so we're going to talk today about chapter 12, and you're going to be doing chapter 13 of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory on your own. So I will be reading pages 46 through 49 and doing numbers 1 and 2, and you're going to be reading pages 50 through 57 and doing numbers 3 through 9. So go ahead and get to your book chapter, which is actually linked right here on your quiz. And once you get there, on the top of this page 46, it says an I do. So I'm going to go ahead and start reading this, and then we'll do the questions afterwards. All right, so chapter 12, what it said on the golden ticket. Charlie burst through the front door shouting, "Mother, mother, mother." Mrs. Bucket was in the old grandparents' room serving them their evening soup. "Mother," yelled Charlie, rushing in on them like a hurricane. "Look, I've got it! Look, mother, look! The last golden ticket, it's mine! I found some money in the street, and I bought 2 candy bars, and the second one had the golden ticket, and there were crowds of people all around me wanting to see it, and the shopkeeper rescued me, and I ran all the way home, and here I am. It's the 5th golden ticket, mother, and I found it!" Mrs. Bucket simply stood and stared, while the 4 old grandparents, who were sitting up in bed balancing bowls of soup on their laps, all dropped their spoons with a clatter and froze against their pillows. For about 10 seconds there was absolute silence in the room. Nobody dared to speak or move. It was a magic moment. Then, very softly, Grandpa Joe said, "You're pulling our legs, Charlie, aren't you? You're having a little joke?" "I am not!" cried Charlie, rushing up to the bed and holding out the large and beautiful golden ticket for him to see. Grandpa Joe leaned forward and took a close look, his nose almost touching the ticket. The others watched him, waiting for the verdict. Then, very slowly, with a slow and marvelous grin spreading all over his face, Grandpa Joe lifted his head and looked straight at Charlie. The color was rushing to his cheeks, and his eyes were wide open, shining with joy, and in the center of each eye, right in the very center, in the black pupil, a little spark of wild excitement was slowly dancing. Then the old man took a deep breath, and suddenly, with no warning whatsoever, an explosion seemed to take place inside him. He threw up his arms and yelled, "Yippee!" And at the same time, his long, bony body rose up out of the bed, and his bowl of soup went flying into the face of Grandma Josephine, and in one fantastic leap, this old fellow of 96 and a half, who hadn't been out of bed these last 20 years, jumped up on the floor and started doing a dance of victory in his pajamas. "Yippee!" he shouted. "3 cheers for Charlie! Hip, hip, hooray!" At this point, the door opened, and Mr. Bucket walked into the room. He was cold and tired, and he looked it. All day long he had been shoveling snow in the streets. "Cripes!" he cried. "What's going on in here?" It didn't take them long to tell him what had happened. "I still don't believe it," he said. "It's not possible." "Show him the ticket, Charlie," shouted Grandpa Joe, who was still dancing around the floor like a dervish in his striped pajamas. "Show your father the 5th and last golden ticket in the world." "Let me see it, Charlie," Mr. Bucket said, collapsing into a chair and holding out his hand. Charlie came forward with the precious document. It was a very beautiful thing, this golden ticket, having been made, so it seemed, from a sheet of pure gold hammered out almost to the thinness of paper. On one side of it, printed by some clever method in jet-black letters, was the invitation itself, from Mr. Wonka. "Read it aloud," said Grandpa Joe, climbing back into bed again at last. "Let's all hear exactly what it says." Mr. Bucket held the lovely golden ticket up close to his eyes. His hands were trembling slightly, and he seemed to be overcome by the whole business. He took several deep breaths, then he cleared his throat and said, "All right, I'll read it. Here we go." And that's where we're going to stop for the teacher model. So if we look back at the first question, it said, "Why did Charlie burst through the door shouting?" So we're going to go back and we're going to think about why Charlie was coming through the door shouting and screaming. What is the big deal? So we see right here, and this is where it says Charlie burst through the front door. Whoops, shouting. Okay, I'll make sure I'm not like that. And we have to see why. Okay, so now we see right here, it says, "Look, I've got it. Look, mother, look, the last golden ticket. It's mine. I found some money in the street and I bought candy bars And then here's where it's in italics right here, which shows that it's something that is very important. And he says, "Look, mother, it's the fifth golden ticket and I found it." So he seems to be very excited about the fact that he found the golden ticket. So if we look through our answers, we can see that A says Charlie has $500 from selling the ticket. Well, we know from the last chapter that people wanted him to sell it, but he didn't because he knew how important it was. B, Charlie found the last golden ticket. That's exactly what he's excited about, but let's keep reading. C, someone stole Charlie's golden ticket. Nope, nobody stole it. And D, he needed someone to go with him to the store. Well, we know that's not true. He kind of went by himself to that candy store. So our best answer to this is B. Number 2. How did Charlie's news affect his grandfather? All right. Whoops. So if we go back to his grandfather, so we're talking about Grandpa Joe, we're thinking about how the news affected Grandpa Joe, what it did to him, how it made him feel. So at first, it says that Grandpa Joe thinks that Charlie's pulling his leg, right? Which means that he doesn't think that he's serious. And so then Charlie eventually said, "No, I'm being serious." And so we have to see now that Grandpa Joe knows that Charlie's being serious, what does that do to Grandpa Joe? Okay, well, it said that he took a close look and then slow and marvelous grin spreading all over his face. So when someone's grinning, they're very happy, right? The color was rushing to his cheeks and his eyes were wide open. And in the center of each eye was a little spark of wild excitement. So we can tell already that he's very excited. Then, with no warning whatsoever, he threw up his arms, and in this picture, we can already just see how excited he looks by his face, that he splashed a bowl of soup on his wife's face. And he got out of bed and he yelled, "Yippee!" And his body went flying, and he hadn't been out of bed for 20 years, but he jumped on the floor and started doing a dance of victory. So he is extremely excited that Charlie won this. So if we look at A, it says Mr. Bucket was surprised and collapsed into a chair. Okay, well, he did. Mr. Bucket did go into a chair, but remember, this is Charlie's father, and question is asking us how it affected his grandfather, not his father. B, Grandpa George began to cry. He was so happy. Okay, now remember, we're talking about Grandpa Joe, and even if we weren't talking about Grandpa Joe, Grandpa George did not have this much excitement. It was just Joe. C, Grandpa Joe jumped and shouted for joy. That's exactly what he did, and we can just even see that right here. Or D, he was upset with Charlie for spending the money. So our best answer here is C. Now what you're going to do is you're going to finish reading pages 50 through 57. This link will bring you right to the pages. And I want you to please press yes because you will have read this and you will go ahead and you will do the rest of the questions on your own. Good luck.